right, everybody, welcome back. Bio Bros, episode 8. I don't really know what to title this one necessarily. We're going to kind of come up with a title after the recording where the direction of this goes. But basically, it's going to be how the hobbies were when we started, and then how it is now, and then kind of where we see it going in the future. So I'm going to start off a little bit with how everything kind of started for me was with fish, of course. Heard that one a million times. I was born into fish keeping. And back then, everything for freshwater at least was hang on the back filters. Those were just the meta. They were the best. Everyone had hang on the backs, I feel like. Little cartridges in there. Fancy people had oh, Alex, bail me out. What's that brand? The good ones.
Of
Uh,
the which one again? Sorry.
the hang on the backs.
Oh, Fluval.
No, the ones that had the clear on them and you could put whatever you wanted in there. They were like a mini overhead sump, basically. But they were
You talking about Aqueon?
here. Hold on, I'll get
They're
in.
like they're still around today, but they're just like they're still that
Yeah,
like grayish clear. Isn't it
yeah.
Aqueon?
No, let me see. Okay, so either way, hang on the back filters were everywhere. Aqua clears. The
Aqua
aqua
clear.
clear. You were balling if you had the aqua clears.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so everyone is keeping the hang on the back filters. Those were everywhere. And when I started too, this was like pre LEDs being really cool. So everyone had the T5 or T8 fixtures on everything. And that was pretty much it for freshwater. Live plants were not a real thing.
Mm-mm.
Um, but we were past the point of like undergravel filters. So then we moved on. We're like, you know what? Bottom was no good. We're going all the way back to the top. We had those. Alex, were you pretty similar on the freshwater thing?
Yeah. Mine. I guess for like freshwater keeping for me because it would start before really I started keeping them because I always had an interest in them. It was when I was like a little kid. My parents had tanks, and that was still early 2000s when they were still doing the undergravel. Because I know we had the trays and stuff for the undergravel filter, so I know we ran one at one point. Um, excuse me, but yeah, same thing. No live plants. It was all fake plants, fake decorations, and things like that. If they
Yeah.
were live plants, they looked really shitty. Excuse my French, but they looked not good. They just were either shredded or just it didn't look good. And the same
Yeah.
thing, T5s are just regular iridescent bulbs.
Yeah. We had that rainbow gravel. Dude, that had the aquarium community in a chokehold back then. I don't know when that stuff came out, but whenever it came out, dude, it hit the market. Everyone had it. And man, it was so bad, but we all had it.
I can proudly say I never had rainbow gravel.
No way you
I've,
didn't have rainbow
I've
gravel.
never had rainbow gravel. I can proudly say that. I have done black and like colored gravel, but like just black gravel. I never had rainbow gravel. My parents didn't have it. They had the natural color. They did not like the rainbows and stuff. I never liked the rainbow. I think I did either blue or red with a beta once, but I never did rainbow. It was either a solid color or natural.
Yeah, my dad had this idea one time, and we were like, we're gonna be so cool. We combined two colors of blue together. We were like, yeah, that is the coolest. And it was so cool for a minute.
Well, see,
And then
back
I
then it
spent years
was.
trying to get rid of it. It was so bad.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing was, is back then that was the style. That was what you were going for. Was this cool, like very vibrant color, neon colored gravel and decorations and stuff like that. I mean, that's
Yeah,
how it was.
with all those taped on backgrounds too. Like,
Don't remind me of those.
yeah, it was a dark time in the freshwater world. Saltwater though, yeah, saltwater tanks growing up too. And saltwater really didn't change that much. From then to now, it's almost the same. It's just a little fancier and a little more expensive. Well, a lot more expensive. Sumps were still what we did. We still had sumps. That was a thing. And we still had the refugium set up with macroalgae and stuff down there. It's just fancy. Like people have fancier tumblers and like algae walls and this and that and media that holds 10 times the surface area of what we had back then and auto dosers and this and that. And we just did all that stuff by hand.
Yeah, I feel like with saltwater, it didn't need to change as much, but it was more of like a as new technology came out that got added in, but it wasn't like a they were just improving on what they were already doing. It was working. It wasn't a change per se.
Yeah, that definitely. Yeah, that's definitely more true. Like they just made saltwater better, and freshwater's really kind of changed. Like nowadays, it's a lot of canister filters are huge right now, and
Hmm.
I'm in agreement. They're really nice.
Oh
They're
yeah, they are very nice, and I feel like nowadays we are more closely trying to actually represent nature when it comes to uh why freshwater. I don't know why I blanked there.
Yeah, I see a
But
lot of
freshwater
people
aquariums.
talking about their first tank and stuff, and I'm kind of the guy people go to. I'm sure you are too in your life. Like just adjacent friends are like, "Hey, I want to get a fish tank. What do I do?" And
Hmm.
they almost always nowadays ask me about planted tanks.
Oh yeah, because I mean that's what is the style. Like what the style when we were kids was the bright gravel, that puke rainbow gravel, which I am so glad that I never actually got. And stuff like that. But now it's the natural bio or not bio but planted aquariums that are not heavily stocked and they're not like a menagerie of a bunch of different species that it normally is a pretty like you have your top water, your mid water, your bottom dwellers, and it's not a let me throw 500 species. It's like one species for each, and
The
it's
Noah's
more.
Ark was really popular back in,
Oh yeah,
and
and I mean I
crazy
still do that
stocking rule
today.
too. Remember 1 inch per gallon?
God, yes, I do.
I haven't heard that in a long time, thankfully. But I did some math on it back in the day, and I just kind of remembered it. So everybody at home, 1 inch per gallon is not true at all.
Mm-mm.
Size it appropriately. Once you get past a 30-gallon tank, the fish is literally bigger than the tank.
Yeah,
It would make standard size aquarium.
yeah, 30-inch fish cannot fit in a 30-gallon tank.
Yeah. So do with that as you will. Or a 20-inch fish does not fit in a 20-gallon tank.
No.
Well, it does fit, but it can't turn around.
Yeah, it sits there and does not move.
Yeah, got 2 inches on either side.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. So I'm very happy with how fish keeping has came in the recent years, and really in the future for fish, I just see it getting better and better.
Oh
And
yeah, I mean it.
things are going
New.
good in fish right now.
Yeah, and I mean new and new stuff's coming out every day basically when it comes to the fish hobby. When it comes to aquariums and stuff, where it's changed so drastically, and like new information and new plants and tissue cultures and things like that, and it's all just like bettering. I think it's heading in the right direction. I think it's going to continue to head in the right direction. Um,
Yeah, blackwater tanks are a thing now that really look like
yes.
true nature. You'd be in 2000 to make a blackwater tank. Doesn't exist, and welfare of the animals is actually considered now. Like most people actually do believe that fish can feel pain, which is true. I have
Hmm.
a whole book on fish and, like, how they perceive the world and stuff, and there's been, like, a dozen studies that prove fish feel pain. They feel every single kind of pain we do, and most of them are actually a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for, so that
Hmm.
stuff is being taken into account now too, like, betas used to be kept in cups, like, their whole life. That was a thing.
Hmm.
Betas do not want water movement, was a common thing people would say, and nowadays, it's like, get them a 5-gallon tank.
Minimum.
Yeah, get them a tank that actually they fit in. That would be nice. Get a little filter action, some heaters,
Hmm.
like, take care of them like a pet for real, like they're alive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like the other thing too that's changed, like when you're talking about that with the betas, really when I go to like even big box stores, there's only one that I can think of off the top of my head that still even has like the fish bowls, and I hate that they have that, but most of them have gotten rid of them and gone away from that. Um, they still have like the 2.5s, which unless you're keeping shrimp nothing else should really be kept in that their entire life. Some microspecies can be like really, really small tetras, but like not a group of them, which is not good either. But
And even then, I'll say those 2.5 more like experienced people keeping.
yeah,
Be like,
because
if you
the
have experience,
swings are so drastic with like pH and things like that.
can you do it? Yeah, you can do it. I've seen reef tanks that small that are successful, but
Yeah.
that's definitely something like down the line too, where you really understand this and you know how this fish behaves and you know you can set it up to maximize the space and all that. Like get a bigger tank. Bigger's better
Oh
in
yeah.
fish always.
Oh,
Um,
and you actually made me think of when you were talking about keeping a reef tank that size. Our buddy Noah has I think it's a 3 gallon bowl or 4 gallon bowl that he has a reef tank, and he keeps it really well and has done it very well, and he's very honest about it and things like that with us. And when he talks about it, he's like, "Yeah, it's very cool, but I hate it because I have to do stuff to it every single day." Because if you don't, and sometimes even multiple times a day, because if you don't, it's going to go out of whack and you're going to have a dead tank in 2 seconds.
yeah, I tell him all the time he's that. Like, I won't keep a saltwater tanks under 40 gallons just because
Mm-mm.
they are nightmares, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
because the swings
Some
are
people do it
too
awesome,
great.
but oh man, disaster. But so we'll move on from fish a little bit to reptiles. Reptiles also is another crazy one. Um, when I first started keeping reptiles, it was the smallest box you can get away with, basically, and it was UV lighting wasn't even really popular. It was known about,
Mm-mm.
but lots of animals were kept without UV. I had a Chinese water dragon, and UV wasn't even a topic. And I was young, so my parents definitely helped me out. But UV wasn't really even a thing that we learned about in care guides back then. And
Mm-hmm.
so she got MBD pretty bad. And then we ended up being able to reverse it a bit when we got UV, but still definitely was the reason her life got cut short was because of that. That was just lack of knowledge. And nowadays, UV is like, I mean, we just did a whole episode on it, and we're still covering, for the most part, I'd say basic stuff. We haven't had an ultra crazy in depth episode yet.
No,
And it's
yeah, and
common knowledge is UV. Yeah, man, you need UV for
yeah,
pretty much everything.
reptiles have also drastically changed for like even me. Like I started my first reptile I got in 2011 because I was 11 years old. Made a bet with my dad that I could keep my room clean for a month. Won the bet. Learned that day. Make bets with dad. Um, and so I went to the pet store and originally I was going to get a bearded dragon. Had done all my research and everything, which back then wasn't a thing either. Most people didn't do that. They just went and got it and then went from there. But I did all
Had
my
those little
research.
brochure care guides.
Yeah, there's really crappy ones that they still
Yeah,
have.
they're
Um,
terrible.
and they haven't changed since. But the I was gonna get a bearded dragon, did all my research, and but my it was originally gonna be my sister and I. Well, my sister switched; she got a cat. So my parents were like, "We don't want you to get a beard." They were trying to convince me to get a cat instead because they didn't want me to get a lizard. And I was dead set. I'm like, "I'm getting a lizard." So my first reptile was a leopard gecko because it was similar care, smaller enclosure, less complicated, and I am actually very glad that I went with got a leopard gecko instead of a bearded dragon, just because of the care size, enclosure size, and the amount of care it would have taken for a bearded dragon. I would not personally recommend bearded dragons for beginners, and I say that because yes, they are easy to take. They can be easy to take care of. They are very easy tempered reptiles. They're great for kids to hold and stuff. They are more complicated than people think. You have to do the UVB, you have to do the veggies, you have to do the insects. It's a whole thing. So I would not recommend them for starters, and that's why I'm glad I didn't get one as a starter. Um, so I got a leopard gecko, and I named her, or named him Rex. And that was back when all the care guides were like, you can keep it in a 10 gallon its entire life. You cannot keep a leopard gecko in a 10 gallon its entire life. Um,
What's a 10 gallons like what? A foot long, I think?
If that, it's
I think it
way
might be like
too
14
small.
inches or
Even
something like that. And I mean,
they've
leopard geckos, what, a big one's 8 inches,
the big one's 10 inches.
big one's 10. So, like,
Yeah,
dude, dude's barely got room in there. He can't
uh,
even really sit sideways.
yeah. I mean, and they've even found more recently, like it went from 10-gallon to 20 long for the minimum, and they've even found more recently, and like more and more people are starting to be like, no, 40 breeders a minimum for them because they do explore and they do need that temperature gradient and stuff that you can't exactly give in them in that smaller enclosure. I luckily didn't start with a 10-gallon because we had a 29-gallon at the house, so we went cool, we'll do that. Um,
Yeah. I remember too, like crested geckos, my first ones were kept in 12 by 12 by 18 tanks because that's what
mhm,
all the knowledge was back then, was they can be in there. Now it's 18, 18, 24
minimum.
is minimum and
Mhm.
ideally even bigger. And like this is another thing kind of gone away, which I'm very happy about with reptiles, is the enclosure can be too big and they'll get scared.
Or
Like
they
what
won't be
is
able to
that?
find food.
What is that, man? That's nonsense. That's not true at all.
Yeah.
Reptiles are actually very intelligent and they learn, they know where food's at, and still, they're not going to not find food in a 3 foot cube.
No. And
Like,
I mean,
you know how small a 3 foot cube really is?
yeah,
Like,
compared to the wild.
and then when you put the food in an obvious spot anyway, they're
Well,
kind
yeah,
of,
and if you do them like my leopard geckos, as soon as I touch that lid, they know what's happening. They're like food out looking up at me. Where is it at?
yeah. And I mean, I can see quarantining animals in a smaller tank, just
Yes.
so that way you can make sure that they're established, especially wild caught or newborn stuff. Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna argue with you that that's okay.
No, it's
And
better
then
to
by
treat.
then, they're not even new. They understand who you are, and they'll have that little connection. They'll know how food works. They'll have an association with their bowl or tongs or certain noise of unlatching something. Like they'll know. And don't worry about
Yeah,
that. Bigger is
they know
always
what's gonna
better with
happen.
every single reptile. I've yet to hear of one where a smaller tank is actually truly better unless you need it for medical reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that is a myth that has always been in the hobby, just like in the aquarium hobby, where it's the fish will grow the size of the tank. It will not.
Yeah.
That is a
Well,
complete lie. I
well, they
had
will. They will do that.
well,
But the issue is they die before they outgrow it.
yeah, because like I had the best example I can think of is we had a 55-gallon fish tank, community tank, and my parents took me to go get a fish because it was like my birthday or something. I don't remember what it was. And well, I picked. They were the people were like, "Oh, they'll all grow the size of the tank." Blah blah blah. So I picked this fish that I named Jaws because it looked like a shark, and I was like, "Cool, I love this thing. It's so cool." It was an iridescent shark, and for those who don't know, iridescent sharks get 3 to 4 feet minimum. He was 14 to 16 inches when we rehomed him because he was getting too big for the 55-gallon tank because he could barely turn around in a 55-gallon tank, and when he did or got freaked out, he threw water and everything inside of it everywhere.
Yeah, and so kind of a little more detail on what I was going on about how they will grow the size of their tank, but they die before they outgrow it. What happens is their physical body gets it stunts. It's not allowed to grow anymore, right?
Hmm.
They run into the sides they cannot grow anymore, like those square watermelons you've seen on like Instagram reels. Same
Hmm.
thing happens with animals. But their organs, they don't get that same feedback and they keep growing and growing, growing inside their body until their organs push up against their own bones and they die from organ failure. So it's a pretty terrible way of doing it. And also, generally, before that even happens, it's just poor care because people who are going to keep fish like that normally have tons of other issues in there. So they're going to die of disease or ammonia poisoning or something like that before they
Hmm.
even get to that size.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like the reptile hobby though, from like so started off with the leopard gecko. Um, Luckily did not do the sand and everything right off. Knew that at least. um, just from external research, not from the pet stores because they tell you to throw. Um, but so raised her up and everything, kept her on a 29, had heat pads and stuff like you're supposed to. But it's drastically changed because even once she got to an adult, it was still part of the hobby where it was like, oh, calcium sand. So I was telling Shaw before the episode that I have a video on my old Instagram account, which is private, and I don't even remember the login, so I can't even get the video. Um, but it is a 29-gallon tank that I had set up for my leopard gecko Rex, and it is excavator clay for the hides and baby blue calcium sand. And I look at that nowadays and go, what was I thinking? But in reality, that's the trend that it was then, was doing sand and different colored ones. And the calcium sand was good because it has calcium in it, when in reality it was killing all of our animals. Um, because it was manufactured sand, so it caused impaction a lot more than natural sand. Natural sand doesn't really impact. At least if it's a healthy animal, a natural sand will not impact them. But it's the hobby has changed so drastically.
Well,
For
and
the better.
the bioactive boom, first one I think happened in like 2015, 2016-ish.
I
Uh,
think that's when I first started doing like live plants and stuff. It wasn't even
yeah,
bioactive; it was just live plants.
yeah. So that was the first time the word bioactive or even live plants and stuff even started getting really thrown in. Actually, a little interesting bit of history. You guys know by now I like the history. Uh, some of the first dart frog tanks ever were bioactive on purpose. Same thing with aquariums where they didn't really know how to keep them, so they just kind of made a little pond. Same thing happened with dart frogs. So some of the first ones were actually bioactive, really rudimentary bioactive tanks, not anything like we really see today, but they still were. And then they fell out of fashion, and dart frog keepers were pretty much the only ones keeping bioactive tanks alive. And then it kind of spread into more and more and more, where now everybody's doing bioactive for everything.
As you
Everybody's going
should.
naturalistic and bioactive, which, yeah, there's no reason not to. It's awesome. Like sometimes it's a little bit of work, but it's fun.
It's
Like to get them set up, because like my bearded dragon tank right now, Alex knows this one. It's been just my biggest issue is building this substrate because I have nothing to
mhm.
go off of. I'm actually truly trying to recreate what the Australian desert is like. And so I've got this fancy sand that's actually from Australia, but that's not actually the only thing I'm using and building this and this and that. But I'm filming the whole process and it's going to be on YouTube. So you guys don't actually have to go through this whole process. Now everybody can just go watch this video and have an awesome soil mix that is actually what the desert feels like.
Yeah, and I feel like as a whole, the reptile hobby has trended in that towards that, which is a good thing because like we've gone away from plastic plants and fake um decor and things like that, and all these really crappy substrates and things like calcium sand and just straight eco earth and things like that. Like it's not always a bad thing. The calcium sand is, don't do that. But straight eco earth is not always a bad thing. Fake plants are not always a bad thing. Fake decors and stuff are not always a bad thing. But as a whole, the hobby has gone away from them, which is a good thing because it's helping us produce happier and healthier animals, and it's helping the hobby grow as a thing for like creating more healthy animals and uh, not all these wild caught and pest filled animals and stuff, or not pest, parasite filled animals and things like that. And it's just better for them in the long run, care wise.
The only thing I would say though, something has regressed a little bit in the reptile keeping hobby specifically, and I think it comes with the rise of morphs. So we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show, just our experiences breeding reptiles. Both of us have had some bad ones that are kind of due to inbreeding.
Hmm.
We'll do a whole episode on the ethics of reptile breeding because that is a whole can of worms. Probably need
Hmm.
a guest or two for that one just for more perspective. But the rise of morphs really led to this price boom in a lot of things, encouraged a lot of mass production of things, and like those huge snake racks that are just full of hundreds and hundreds of snakes that are kept in small environments are not ideal. And it's led to everybody creating a world's first. And now they're trying to sell them for $1 million, and the floor falls out of the market, and there's just way too many ball pythons and crested geckos out in the world now.
Well,
And
so
those are just some examples, but I would say that regressed a little bit. But overall, I'd say we're definitely better, and we're doing a lot more good than bad. We're not really regressing that much. Just a small little cultural thing more than anything
mhm.
is people want to be the world's first, people want to be ultra unique, and they found out that some animals you can really pack in, and they're really good at not dying. I say that
Yeah,
about goldfish too. Goldfish are really, really good at not dying. That doesn't mean they're happy, doesn't mean they're healthy. They are just dude, they'll live through anything, and
they're
they'll look
stubborn.
totally yeah, they're very stubborn, they are hard to kill.
Well,
Ball
eh,
pythons are just like that. Dude, they are hard to kill. I've seen some rough ball pythons bounce back to full health in like 3 weeks.
yeah, and I mean, it's like with an example of like a ball python morph that probably shouldn't have ever existed and got bred into the hobby until it finally is not as much anymore. It's the spider morph.
Yeah, the spiders at reptile shows, I went on a big
Oh
rant
yeah,
the
they're
other
not
day about
as
them
bad
with
though.
somebody. Just it drives me insane. It's very, very unethical. Part of
Well,
that
yeah,
visual morph comes with neurological disabilities, and it's very unethical. If you're
yeah, and
keeping
it's
spiders and breeding spiders, you're not a good person. If you
no,
rescued a spider, good person, good on you. That's hard to do. But if you're intentionally breeding spiders, you're not a good person, man. Like, you're intentionally breeding unhealthy animals. If people did that with cats and dogs that couldn't walk and eat on their own, crashed into walls and stuff because they had such bad neurological issues, you'd be in jail, but it's okay because they do it to reptiles.
yeah, and that is again part of it that was regressed a little bit. But I will say I have noticed um like a kind of a counter to the regression a little bit. I don't think we are currently still regressing because when you look at the market, like morph market is the best example I can give. Ball python numbers are actually falling. Like they used to be like 76 to 80% of the entire market. And I think now they're down to like 68 to 70% only. And things like colubrids are growing. And not just corn snakes and your hog noses. Like those are still a major part of the colubrids. But things like king snakes, bull snakes, gopher snakes, pine snakes, pituophis, uh, milk snakes, your other obscure colubrids and things like that, your pantherophis and things like that. Those are actually gaining popularity. And I've even noticed it at shows, garter snakes, things like that. We're starting to kind of move away from that surge of ball pythons and ball pythons only, and also the same with cresteds because more and more recent people have realized that cresteds, most of their quote unquote morphs, aren't genetic. They're just like line bred traits essentially because they aren't an actual genetic morph. They're just like you can breed two of the same morph together and get something completely different because it's not a genetic morph. Um, and then I was also telling Shaw like there's a company that is now, or they already are doing it for uh, ball pythons, but they will take a piece of the shed and they've been cleaning up that world's first to like what it actually is genetically, and they've been cleaning up those morphs so like there's not just a million different morphs that are all the same thing but different names. They've been cleaning that up so people actually realize, oh, this is all just a cinnamon or this is all just a yellow belly, and people have just named it 500 different things.
I
Um,
definitely agree, like, we kinda went through a dark time, some unethical breeding and
mhm.
oversaturation. I think we're coming out of it better. I I I do think we are in trending towards the correct thing with
Yeah.
reptiles, just like we have with fish. Like, I think everything really is getting better, and people who get caught up on a few of the bad things are, like, a little pessimistic about it, I think. It is true, like, yeah, nothing is perfect. There's definitely some still glaring issues with keeping animals, and there always will be because there will always be people who don't appreciate them as living beings the same way that, like, I do. So, there'll always be, like, ethical concerns and things like that. Always, that will always come up. That's just gonna be a debate till the end of time.
There's always
But
gonna be bad apples.
yeah, and there's always gonna be people who are, being dumb and giving the community a bad name or hurting animals. Like, people still do it to dogs and cats, and we generally love dogs and cats. Same thing will always happen, but we're getting better. Definitely better overall, I think. And we'll go into the last one because we kinda lived through an interesting bit of it, was the plant hobby. So, me and Alex both kinda got into plants about the same time, a little before 2020 and slash in 2020 kinda deal during that whole plant-demic thing. That was kind of where we started. We started a little differently than most people because most people during that time, they wanted plants for their house because they realized their houses were really boring when they got stuck in them, and we kinda started getting into plants because some of our other friends were getting into plants and bioactive tanks and stuff, and then that just kinda caught on, and we just stuck with it. But that was a crazy time. If you remember that one, like,
Oh,
when
yeah.
every that plant market was insane.
It really was, and I mean, so I actually got into plants probably more around 2013, 2014, and when I say into plants, I wasn't like I had my big boom right around the same time you did with that 2019, 2020, where I really, really got into plants, but, like, before that, I kept plants for, like, tanks, like, I'm gonna post Shaw and I are gonna post some old pictures of old tanks that we have on Instagram after this episode, and like the one that I'm posting is my old green and knoll tank, and I had things like parlor palms and uh what is it, heteroecium, heartleaf heteroecium, um and like golden poth. I don't even think I had golden pothos yet. That was still exotic to me. But like cheap, everyone's seen them stuff, and
Good
but
old
I was
grocery
keeping
store
them.
plants.
Yeah, good old grocery store plants because that's where I was buying them. But I liked it and was fascinated by it because like I liked having them in these tanks because I thought it looked good, and I thought it looked better than fake plants and stuff. Um, but then like once like same time around 2019, 2020 when everything really boomed, that's when I really started to get into more of like the house plants and keeping tropical plants in my house, not just for my animals, but just for me.
And so
And
that went insane though, like,
oh yeah.
because a lot of plants not mass that time. The
Hmm.
I don't remember what the numbers are, but it was insane, the demand for houseplants.
Well, it's
And
like,
then that made the rare houseplants, do that in air quotes, because they weren't necessarily rare, they just got drove up in price.
hmm
Anything variegated, you add a 0 to the price. Whatever it was before, just
add
add
a
a
few
0.
zeros.
And yeah, depending on what they were, a lot of zeros. So nowadays, they're grocery store plants, like Philodendron Pink Princess, $100 bare minimum ticket of entry to get one of those. That is a grocery store plant now. You'll find
Yeah,
them
it's
on
like
clearance
ten
racks.
bucks.
They're so, yeah. Like, I wouldn't even pay for one. I'd just probably find one of my friends that has one. They'd be like, yeah,
Hmm.
sure, have it.
Well,
On
it's like,
Terra Albos too. I just got one for $40, a big one,
oh, you got that
and
one lucky. Albos have actually held their price a little bit. I will say that.
because they don't do very well
Albos,
in TC, so they
yes.
do
So
have to drop.
Albos
I did
have
get
held
lucky
their
on that,
price.
but just like I said though, me getting lucky on that is a lot different than what it would have been back then. Getting
Oh
lucky
yeah,
on that plant, exact one, would have been still several $100s.
yeah,
And
and like my
nowadays it might be like 100, but I did get it
yeah,
for an absolute steal because it was mislabeled, but
yeah.
different story.
Well, I mean, it's like
Or
my
even
Tide
Thai
Con.
constellations, you got those.
Yeah, I got two of them now, and I've wanted them since they blew up because I just think they're pretty plants. Didn't care about the variegation and things like that. I like Monstera. I mean, I not didn't care about the variegation. I like Monstera deliciosa. I liked the variegation. I was going to die first before I spent over $100 on one. The two that I have now, one is a highly variegated one to where its second youngest leaf has like half white, half green, almost like an albo, but the rest of them are just very variegated. I spent $30 on that one at Walmart, and then my other one, which is twice the size and lower variegation, I spent $50. So combined in $80, which, but back then, those together would have been like $1,000+ or more. Because I
Yeah, it was,
still remember one of the guys who used to be friends with, who were not anymore, trying to sell me his Tycon for like $1,600.
yeah, I remember that.
And it was
Even then, that was
infested
over.
with mealies and
But
stuff, and he was trying to sell it for that.
yeah, uh, but yeah, that was crazy. The real like clout of plants was insane back then. Just
Hmm.
everybody was just following the trends, which is still a thing in plants, and it has been throughout all of history of plants. Some plants get trendy and then they fall off because everybody has them, so it's supply, demand, all that. But it was crazy back then for variegated plants specifically. Now it's anthuriums that are really
Hmm.
trendy. Um, no shade to our previous guests and friends, Harrison and Owen. They were pioneers in the game. They got in it early. Owen's making Owen's setting trends at this point. Like he's got his hands on some really cool stuff.
He's got some really
Uh,
nice anthuriums.
really nice anthuriums. So he's more like the trendsetter at this point now. Then people are following on that. But anthuriums are really blowing up. People love them. That's what's really cool. And give it another few months, and they'll think something else is super cool,
Well,
and
I've
it'll be
also
the
noticed with like we went from the big boom of variegated, all these different ones like Albos, Deliciosa, or Tycons, Pink Princess, White Knights, and things like that. And now the trend seems to be more truly rarer plants. Like yes, anthuriums too, but
a lot of
obscure
chasing
and weirder plants that
a
aren't.
lot of chasing original clones and stuff. Like people
Yes,
want this a cutting from, so that takes a long time, and those definitely hold more value. And to an
which I
extent, I'm that
think
way too.
is.
Like I love clones.
Oh
My
yeah.
Nepenthes gracilis black, like, Alex, I'm sure you remember me sending that one picture I
Hmm.
found of that one, and I spent like a year and a half tracking it down.
You've been
And
gone so long trying to find that thing.
it took me forever. And then I finally got it, and then I love it now. It's one of my favorites. Same thing with my Black Miracle. That was another plant I got very lucky on. It's still a quite expensive plant. I got it for a really good deal, but I was dead set on getting a Black Miracle. I love that plant. It's awesome. Ask anybody into Nepenthes, they'll all tell you the one. If it's not number one, it's on the podium of best clones of Nepenthes ampullaria. It's awesome. Love that plant too. Yeah, definitely clones are a thing, and then even some specific nurseries, people want that lineage nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's a good trend. Again, we're all seeming to trend better in these hobbies where the plants were trending more towards cuttings and clones and things like that instead of wild poached plants, which is good. And then we're also trending towards instead of all these weird variegated, which we still do, and they're still very much so amazing. But we're trending towards pure plants and the weird and obscure looking plants and like just interesting like natural plants, which I think is a good thing for the hobby as well. Um, but I mean, and it's all changed because like you and I are the last two in our friend group to get Tycons or Albos. All of them, everyone else bought them when they were $200, $300. Because I remember like Owen, best example, he had that Albo that he chopped up and he sold each chunk for like 150 or more or something like that.
Yeah, I got
And
one of the cuttings from that plant actually. So I actually
yeah,
had an elbow when they were expensive. I paid $60. This isn't he didn't give me an ultra deal or anything like that. Like, this was on his story. I sent him a message and said sold on this. This was not private. So this is what it was sold for. It was sold for $60 to me, and it was a near bottom cutting, pretty low variegation, and it was a good deal.
Yeah,
Like,
and
that was a
I
good deal
forgot
on that plant at the
forgot
time.
you had gotten that one. So I truly am the last one to get any type of variegated monstera because I got these two this year, and these were the first ones that I've ever had. But
Yeah,
it's the trend has gone to the right direction, I believe, and it's also when it comes to like plants and things like that, even reptiles, even fish, don't go for something just because it's trendy. Don't be like, oh hey, I'm gonna get this and then I'm gonna breed it, and like you can do that, yes, but you want to be interested in it because it's like me. I was very interested in Monstera Deliciosa type constellation, but
yeah.
I wasn't
Definitely get things
interested
you
enough
actually love.
yeah, and I wasn't interested enough to spend that stupid amount of money on a plant that might die. Because, like I've told you and I've told all of our other friends, if I had bought one that was $250 and it died, I would have been next. But
Yeah. Definitely, that is a theme, and you hear us repeat this all the time in this whole podcast. Like, go back to your old episodes, I'll say it again. Get something because you like it, not because other people told you it was cool. Because you
yeah,
hear about so many people who burn out on hobbies. It happens in fish all the time. It's how I get pretty much all my expensive gear for fish is I just lurk Facebook groups and offer up when I'm looking for something. And somebody, sure enough, all the time says getting out of the hobby, lost interest in it. And almost every time it's because they're keeping what's really, really trendy. They're not necessarily keeping what they love. They're
hmm
keeping what other people love, which is fine. I mean, that's how everyone gets their foot in the door. But definitely try to keep what you really like. And if you really like what's popular, that's cool. Things are popular for a reason. Like,
oh
they're
yeah, they're
popular because they're
popular.
good.
Yeah, I mean they're popular for a reason, and lots of people do like the popular ones. But if it's not something you personally love or are like really interested in, don't get it. Go for what you do. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It matters what you think. Because
Yeah, because
then if you don't, if you do, then you're going to take the best care of that plant, that animal, that fish. You're going to set it up the best. You're going to do the best for it, and it's going to live the best and happiest life for both of you, and the longest life.
yeah, and you won't have that lost interest sale. You won't just
Yeah,
be like, I'm getting out of it. It's just not cool anymore because you got into it because you really, really liked it. Now, if you get out for who knows why, like, it doesn't have to be lifetime, but it is like when you're taking care of living things, it's their lifetime at least, and you should probably plan for that. So make sure it's one you really like. And I think we're
yeah,
doing better at that as a hobby too. Like, every Christmas, we see the same post come up. It makes its rounds as we're not gifts, we're lifetime commitments, and it's got the picture of
mm-hmm,
the little chameleon and the bearded dragon, right? If you've been in the
mm-hmm.
hobby around Christmas, you've seen that post. It comes every year. And that stuff didn't exist back in the day. And we actually have to thank social media for that. As annoying as social media is sometimes, when people sensationalizing things and all the issues that come with it, it also allows for information to be shared so easily. And that's the whole reason that I've done a ton of things is all of my friends I've made through social media, just all of us talking about things. And I know I've influenced people to do things too, just they have to me because we talk about all that. And that's done a really good for the hobby, I think, overall. Definitely
Oh
some
yeah,
bad apples out there. Right? There's a few. There's a guy in the hospital right now for Instagram views,
let's
but
not get into that one. That's
yeah,
gonna
we're
open
not
a
getting
whole
into that.
other
I'll
thing.
get too angry about that one. Better not give that guy anything anyway. But
No, no, he doesn't deserve the attention.
no, but yeah. So there are definitely bad apples out there, but there's a lot of good apples too. Lots of people doing really cool, good stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, and the hobby is growing towards the right way. People are weeding out the bad apples. People are looking at them and going, "You're an idiot. Why are you doing this?" And starting to do better in the hobby in general, and like better at policing ourselves because that's where it's going to get really important. Um, because as the hobby continues and continues to trend towards the more like obscure stuff and things like that. We are going to have to get better about policing ourselves and stuff so that the government doesn't come and make all these regulations and stuff to make it impossible for us to keep the animals we love. Like,
And I think we're doing a good job at generally to not necessarily calling people out like just instantly, just being more of the educational side. And then
yes.
when they decide to be annoying about it, then it's like, all right, this dude's just a jerk.
Yeah, I exactly
That's
agree.
that's important too. Like education first, go about everything very nicely. But if somebody's unwilling to learn, like, what can you really do about that?
Yeah, you can
But
only
yeah,
do
like
so
I think we're
much.
trending in a good spot too. Like I've seen isopods and springtails and bioactive kits. I'm not a fan of kits in general. I think none are great, but they're done a lot better now. Like the fact that a bioactive kit exists at PetSmart is insane. If you told me that 5 years ago, I'd be like, no way. Like
Yeah.
bioactive, kind of a thing. But no, it's actually a thing that's mainstream now. The big chain stores are selling it. The big chain stores are selling like very overpriced, but they're selling it still, like Drone and Sirius Stone and stuff
I mean, well, they're
for
also
real office kit.
selling like PetSmart has isopods now and springtails. They're
Yeah,
again overpriced, but they are selling them now to create bioactives and things. They have switched or moved from having their bearded dragons on sand and their leopard geckos on sand in their displays to where now they're either on a straight or they're on repti carpet sometimes, which that's a whole nother thing. Repti carpet is not good to have, but they are trending towards the right direction. They're not on loose substrate as these little tiny baby animals. Um,
yeah. And speaking of baby animals too, we're not really seeing as many like neonate animals being sold. So like that means like tiny, tiny babies, basically infants, and not really seeing that anymore. Like I remember seeing dart frogs that were so small they couldn't fit on your pinky nail. Like those things morphed out that week for sale. That doesn't really happen too much anymore. You're getting more established things. You're not
yeah,
seeing baby snakes that haven't even had their first shed yet or first meal for sale as much anymore. So that's good.
yeah. I think as a whole, all these hobbies that we've talked about today, the aquarium hobby, the plant hobby, the reptile hobby, trended in the right direction. Oh, excuse me, the right direction, and they have actually started to be better. And in general, I think they're just doing a lot better now.
Yeah, but it is pretty crazy to think back though. Just not that long ago, it was that crazy rainbow gravel, only hang on back filters.
Blue calcium sand.
Yeah, the calcium sand, the heat rocks, no UV, small tanks, and then like all that stuff was just not that long ago, really. People
Yeah, I
forget
mean it
that
was.
when you've been in the hobby forever, you tend to level up too. Like I was past that point when I was already past all that because I had been keeping fish for 15 years. So I was already like working on getting more modernized tanks, like what's common now. I was kind of working on that because I've been a veteran already. But we have to remember what the normal person's like. You know, most people aren't born into fish keeping. They get into it when they're maybe 15. And I had been into it for a while then. So it's hard to really think about how crazy and different things really were back then when you've leveled up. Right?
Yeah, I mean I
And
was
that's
the
not a
same
knock
way.
on anybody else. It's just hard to have that perspective sometimes.
Well, and there's I feel like the hobby has gotten all of these hobbies have also gotten better about when beginners come in, they're not giving them all this crappy stuff to start with. They're starting them off like natural gravel, some live plants that are easy, things like that now for like fish, or like a naturalistic enclosure with live plants and stuff for animals or for reptiles, or like basic house plants for the plants. They're not they're not throwing that or advertising the rainbow gravel and the calcium sand and things like that as much. Um, so again, it's just another sign that the hobby is trending in the right direction. And it's you always got to remember we all started somewhere. like that's the whole kind of point of this episode is like looking back and like seeing how the hobby has changed. We all started somewhere. We all look back at how we started in the hobby and go, "What was I doing?"
Yeah,
And
it'll be
it's
funny
just
to come back to
cringy
this episode in, like, 5, 10 years
and
and
it'll
be
be
like,
completely different.
"Can you believe what those guys are saying?" Because I think kinda end on some notes for the future. I think that we're actually gonna be trending more towards the European and Japanese style of fish and reptile keeping,
Hmm.
where it's a lot more of having one big nice tank rather than 50 little ones. Like,
Hmm.
that's not flex. The because in America, the culture of animal keeping has kinda been, "I have 40 species of this or that," or the more the merrier was kind of the thing, which is not necessarily bad. It can get bad, but isn't necessarily. But over in Europe and Japan, they are more like, "Look how nice I have this. I've got
Yeah,
the
I have
nicest
this.
tank." That's
You
more of
have,
their flex, and I
yeah.
think we're getting closer to that style, and again, mainly because of the internet. We're seeing all these, like, normal people know who Takashi Yamano is now, and have seen some of that work
Hmm.
that he's done and been like, "Wow, that is a beautiful aquarium. How do
Oh
I do
yeah,
that?"
and we're even trending towards like how the episode we talked about people using it or not using them specifically, but allowing them to be a part of their home decor. So you're trending towards that one big display tank that looks like a showpiece as your home decor versus 10 or 20 small tanks that don't look good.
Yeah, I definitely could see it that way. Like Germany has a lot of really nice stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, I think if you look at Germany, I think you'll see America in 5 or 10 years,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
yeah, so that's kinda neat to look at too. Like, other countries definitely do things different because different cultures and all that,
In
and
different
it's cool to be
stages
able to yeah, like Japan, they've been keeping fish for literally, like, 1,000 years. It's
or more.
insane. Like, they've been keeping koi forever. And China too, like, in that episode that we talked about, the different types of vivariums, China was actually the first to do it, but Japan's really been consistently doing it and consistently doing it for ornamental purposes for a long time. They got very good at that. So,
Hmm.
that's kinda why I use them as an example over, like, China. Just I think they're some of the best at keeping fish, really. They're good.
Yeah, I think to kind of like wrap up this episode's obviously more of a episode of us just kind of rambling, talking about the past, where we see the hobby going, how it's been changing since even we got into the hobby. Um, and it's more of less of an educational episode, more of just like a chill listen to and see how we've changed and how the hobby's continuing to change and how we think it will.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely just more of our thoughts, opinions, and stuff of how everything's going, which I think is important too. Like, not everyone wants to watch a lecture every single episode. If you've made it
no,
this far too, leave a comment in there. Like, what's something you started with, and like how you see it changing, how you personally changed. Do all that. I want to hear about that stuff in the comments too. Like, that's cool to me.
yeah, I
I
want to
like to
hear
see when we
about
started in
y'all's
the same spot and we didn't.
I want to hear about y'all's first setups and things like that, and like compare it to how we first set up or things like that, or how your first setup was similar or different than ours. I just think that'd be really cool. But like to wrap it up, we think the hobbies are all going in the right direction. I think that we all both think that they will continue to go into the right direction. If you've listened this far, thank you for listening. If you can give us a like or a follow on Instagram and then also on here on YouTube. I really appreciate it. It would help us grow this community. We want to build a community around this podcast of like-minded reptile and plant and fish lovers like us. Um, but yeah, if y'all enjoyed this episode, uh, give us a like, follow. You can hit the little notification bell on YouTube. Know you're notified when we post. We try to post every Friday around noon. It's not always exact, but we do try. But thank you for listening. I hope y'all have a good day, night, morning, whenever you listen to this.
Yep, and see y'all next week.
See you guys.